Global Entrepreneurship Week is an annual celebration of entrepreneurship in over 170 countries with roughly 9 million participants, 35,000 events and activities in each state and country. It showcases entrepreneurs, mentors, and business leaders and connects with opportunities, partners, and kindred spirits all around the country and the world. So we are very happy to be a part of this event. These events are organized and hosted by some of Arizona's most prominent organizations and leaders, such as the Arizona Commerce Authority, Seed Spot, the Grand Canyon University, City of Mesa, Startup Tucson, yours truly, and very many others. And you can learn more if you visit gew-az.com. And so the last thing before we begin, we would like to thank one of the sponsors of Global Entrepreneurship Week, Atomic Social. Atomic Social's website showcases your brand and distinguishes you from your competitors. It's a digital marketing firm specializing in website design, SEO, and helps you rank your website at the top of Google and social media content creation. Atomic Social is offering all GEW attendees a 50% discount on a new website design. This is a $3,000 value website with up to 8 pages for only $1,500. You can learn more at atomicsocial.com. And with that, welcome to Innovation Economics. So Innovation Economics is a series by Startup Tucson focused on sharing why entrepreneurship is so critical for economic development, what we as a community can do to set our startups up for success. In particular, today's focus is international startups. Each month, we invite thought leaders to join us and share the work they're doing to support entrepreneurship across our community and across the nation, and today the globe. And our goal is really to explore these new ideas and use them as inspiration for policies and programs that we can use in our community and your communities across the country. So my name is Liz Pocock. I'm the CEO of Startup Tucson. With me today on the call is Dre Thompson will be our co-facilitator, co-moderator with me today. Sophia and Kanisha are also here from my team. We'll introduce our panelists in just a moment. Startup Tucson is an economic development organization and nonprofit that's working to support entrepreneurs and startups here in Tucson, Arizona. We're based out of the Arizona Forge, and we serve approximately 3,000 entrepreneurs a year through our educational programming, mentorship, and networking opportunities. Today, for our special edition of Innovation Economics, we are going to provide perspective on working in the United States as an international founder, the differences in working across borders, and how service providers can better work with entrepreneurs internationally. So our panelists include Mark, Sergey, Oksana, and Eric, and I'm going to let them self-introduce.
Thank you, Liz, and thanks everyone at Startup Tucson for the invitation. My name is Mark Marino. I'm a senior program officer and global team lead at VentureWell. My background's in molecular biology and public health with a focus on infectious disease. I've done some work, lived in West Africa for a couple of years, did some work with a startup in the US, went back to Africa and did some health system strengthening work for an INGO. And I currently lead all of VentureWell's global programming. VentureWell is a 25-year-old nonprofit organization based here in Western Massachusetts, hence the bucolic background, providing support to help entrepreneurs bring their ideas out of the lab and into the market. We do this with a number of programs, grant funding, as well as investments for entrepreneurs through workshops, training, and non-dilutive funding. We do this with faculty, helping provide education and training for staff and faculty in the higher education institutions. And then we do this with network convenings as well. And our work outside the U.S. that I lead is a partnership with the U.S. State Department called the Global Innovation Through Science and Technology Program, or GIST for short, that works in 135 different countries, providing all sorts of entrepreneurship training, pitch competitions, as well as support for some of those entrepreneurs to come to the U.S. to learn about the U.S. market and build and discover their business model in the United States. We piloted a program last year called the U.S. Business Incubation Program that brought amazing entrepreneurs from 29 countries around the world to 10 U.S. states. Oksana, who you heard about, is one of them, who came to the University of Arizona for 6 weeks of business incubation and learn about the U.S. model. So happy to be here and talk more about the work, some of our programs, and any advice we can provide to those online.
Great, thanks, Mark. Sergey, do you want to introduce yourself? Just yourself, your background, a little bit about your company? And then what market you're in and what markets you're in now and what markets you are trying to go to in the future.
Hello, everybody. It's lovely to see such young and smart faces. So I'm not that young as you, maybe 3 times older, but still young and hot. So my background is that I'm PhD in economics. I'm bachelor degree. I have a bachelor degree in political sciences and linguistics back from Moscow University, Russia. So I was born in 1960. Please keep this in mind. So I did see a lot of things going on. I've been in state-owned and government-regulated economy. So I've been in free market economy. So I relocated to the States in 1993. So I did participate in some kind of .com bubble. That's where my first capital came from. So then I repatriated some capital back to Europe. So I had businesses in Germany, in Sweden, in Russia, and everywhere it was successful, I would say. So from beginning of from the mid of 20s, so I'm permanently in Tucson. That's where I live from 1993. And my last, I'm serial investor and entrepreneur. Yeah. So Enduro Power and Elitize, those companies which were launched in here in Tucson, Arizona, and they are in smart battery business. So basically the product is this, any kind of battery, any application for marine, auto, satellites, whatever, just name it, where the power needed. But we added the intelligence to the battery. So the battery are managed, the battery management system is entirely intelligent and can be managed remotely. So that's my last startup company in here, and it was recently acquired by a big sovereign holding company, which is in 5G, where we are part in power division, and I lead the power division. Besides being CEO of Enduro Power, I'm also VP at Sovereign, at our parent company, which is public company. It's about almost $400 million capitalization. So that's basically briefly. So if you give me direct questions, because I have such a long story and history, so I will be more precise. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergey. We'll give you some specific questions after we do everybody else's introductions. Oksana?
Hi. Hi, my name is Oksana. I'm CEO and one of the 4 co-founders of Leaky. Leaky is based in Kiev, Ukraine. It's 3.5 years old. And Leaky is a platform for analyzing and tracking brand communications. Our big mission is to help each communications manager to better understand their impact and to grow this impact on business results. We do this by creating the ecosystem of products that ideally matches the daily workflow of those managers for communications, with an emphasis on increasing efficiency and predictability of brand communications. Leaky is a B2B SaaS with the master subscriptions and usually annual contracts. We have grown on 30% during the last year, and I'm really proud of this because of this COVID and all other things. So at the moment we do have 1.3 million annual recurring revenue. That translates into slightly more than $100,000 monthly recurring revenue. We have 222 customers, mostly in Eastern Europe. Those include huge companies like Monsanto, McDonald's, BASF, to name a few, also governmental institutions, PR agencies, and so on and so forth. At the moment, we are trying to expand to Romania and markets closer to Ukraine. And I'm really interested if someone knows anyone out from there. Also, we do a lot of things in our products to make it more competitive. And I would later answer the question why we still not consider USA as a market.
Perfect. Thank you, Oksana. And Eric?
Hello, everyone. Eric Smith, Executive Director of the University of Arizona Center for Innovation. Prior to being at UACI, I was with Tech Launch Arizona at the University of Arizona helping to launch startups based on intellectual property owned by the university. And prior to that, I spent many years mostly failing at startups. UACI is the University of Arizona's Startup Incubator Network. We serve scalable science and tech ventures that come from the university, they come from our community, or they come from around the world. We have an international soft landing program, which is certified by the INBIA, or the International Business Innovation Association. We are also a proud partner incubator with VentureWell in the State Department in the GIST program. So we serve startups from other countries in a couple of different ways, which I'm sure we'll dive into here during the session. Just thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. Thanks, Eric. So as you can hear from our panelist introductions, we've put together kind of a collection of both entrepreneurs that have kind of come into the U.S. market or explored the U.S. market through a variety of programs. And then we also, and so we invited them here to hear their perspective. I think Oksana's is going to be really interesting because she actually decided not to enter the US market after participating in the program. So she's going to share that and how the program kind of helped with that, making that decision. And then Eric and Mark are both, really helping these international founders consider the market through their programs. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about what we can do as supporters of international entrepreneurs to make sure that they're successful as they explore the market and as they do try to move here. So thank you, panelists, for being here. We're very excited. So we're going to move into some questions, and Dre is going to start by asking Mark a few questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Liz, for setting that context. And so we'll do a couple we'll do some targeted questions with each of the panelists, and then we'll do a little bit of discussion. And then as questions are coming up for you, please feel free to drop those into the chat because we will get to an interactive portion towards the end. All right, Mark, I would love, you talked a little bit about VentureWell and kind of the work that you're doing as a nonprofit. Can you talk a little bit more about the overall mission and also the GIST program and the Global Innovation Through Science and Technology program, and a little bit how you structured that program and kind of what that program's aim is?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Jay. Yeah, so VentureWell was started 25 years ago with this idea that if you could somehow integrate all the great things about U.S. entrepreneurship with higher education, you'd have more startups, more successful startups, and grow a knowledge-based economy from the ground up, from the school-based system. 25 years ago, that was a bit of a novel thought. And with some seed funding from the Lemelson Foundation, they established the first programs that provided grants to students to be able to take an idea from a concept phase and really be able to have their first sources of funding and training on what it would mean to commercialize or even think if the product is commercializable, really focusing on science and tech. And then to provide grants to faculty that allowed them to train and build curriculum around entrepreneurship, education and training. Over that time, over 25 years, we've learned a lot of different things. We've supported 9,500 entrepreneurs, 1,700 ventures were established, and they've raised over $1 billion of funding in that time period. So we've taken that model and applied it to other places that have worked really well, like the National Science Foundation, their I-Corps program. We help implement and run that through that methodology. We do this with other types of funders and partners like USAID, State Department, Gates Foundation, and most recently, in the last 7 months, my entire life has been consumed with an NIH initiative called RADx, the Rapid Acceleration of Diagnostics Initiative, to try to bring all of the scientific community in the United States to help build rapid SARS-CoV-2 testing to address the COVID-19 crisis. So the concepts that we've developed are applicable in a variety of different institutions, especially outside the United States. So around 9 years ago, President Obama launched an initiative to establish a new U.S. diplomatic effort that is part of a partnership at that time with Egypt and the Middle East, that part of U.S. Diplomatic efforts could be focused on entrepreneurship as a means of diplomacy. So a program was launched called the Global Innovation Through Science and Technology program that allowed the best of U.S. knowledge, entrepreneurship, and innovation to be brought to market who have never even heard of the concept of entrepreneurship. And the idea is to take this type of training, curriculum, support, US instructors, investors, and really work within a local ecosystem to apply that to those country contexts and support innovators, entrepreneurs, businesses within that context to help grow the economy within that country. So what started as an experiment, has now evolved to all sorts of different unique programs we've been offering as part of that partnership with the State Department. We've been in about 90 countries out of the 135 that are eligible, doing everything from angel investment training to pitch competitions as part of areas to build capacity with local organizations.
That's awesome. Okay, and don't get mad. I'm going to go a little off script from the questions that I sent you because you just really piqued my interest about this idea of the role of global entrepreneurship and COVID. Obviously, this is a problem that we're all in together as a world. Can you talk a little bit about the role of like your types of programming and the supports that you're offering for entrepreneurs that's enabling the collaboration to solve this grand challenge that we're all in?
Yeah. Great question. COVID is like the perfect example of, just thinking about one country's interest to address both preventative measures or an infectious disease outbreak is not how the world works. Globalization, is here to stay. There's no, what happens in one country affects another country. So the solutions to the global problems are global solutions. And I think what we've seen in the COVID response is an outpouring of like scientific collaboration, more information being shared, more support, trying to work together to solve this uniformly. And when that happens really well, you can take the best of business, academia, and government and really work together to move things that never really thought could be achieved. So just on the US context and the work I've been involved in, the normal timeline to bring a diagnostic to market is, 3 to 5 years. And we were able to move, get 700 applications and move 137 with funding, and then 25 ultimately to get to commercialization in the span of 6 months when this disease was, and a disease that was not identified on issues that were really hard to address. So it shows you like the power of collaboration when you bring all of these partners together to be able to really move things that historically were not done. You're seeing this now in the vaccine development and how long, normal vaccine, the earliest in the world was 4 years with measles. And we're looking at a timeline of, potentially a year and a half, 2 years to get a vaccine on the market that might be available next year. So, it really shows both the cross-border collaboration when that works well, how successful that could be in all the different partners you need to engage to be successful. From government to the startups, look at the startups that are creating some of these vaccines, Moderna, BioNTech, like these are startups, right? They're partnering with large companies that are moving this forward. So, I think these are models of how you can do translational work, commercialization work in collaboration to solve global problems extremely successfully.
Thanks for hanging in there with my off the sheet question, but I think it's just super timely. And like you're saying, I mean, it's unprecedented how much information is flowing between scientists. So it's been a real triumph in that way. So I just wanted to hit on that because that's a very interesting part of what you do. Okay, so so you mentioned you're in 90 different countries. Can you talk a little bit about the differences from your perspective as a stakeholder in entrepreneurs from these different types of countries? How does culture play a role in that? How are founders different from country to country?
I mean, it's remarkable how much like an entrepreneur or a startup is the same. Has the same characteristics: the passion, the enthusiasm, the drive. You'll hear from some of them, from Sergey to Oksana, that regardless of age or generation, like an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur, and some of those characteristics are the same. Each market is just wildly different that we've seen when entering these markets. In some cases, the levers of change are slightly different. It's more on the regulatory environment that needs to be created. It's a little bit more on access to finance that needs to be alleviated to help startups grow. So, the gaps are different across the different markets. And in some cases, they're remarkably consistent. Everyone thinks, that we've got everything figured out here in the United States in terms of helping build a startup ecosystem. And everyone points to the Silicon Valley model of how you do that. And I'd argue that you look right here in Arizona and you look at some of the great work happening at the universities and some of the startup ecosystems, that's a much more applicable model. of how you do this, sustain businesses and create successful businesses, not just try to predict unicorns over time. So, I think we're seeing like that translation down to other parts of the country and other models looking to build their own type of frameworks that are applicable in those markets. So, we're seeing this in Ukraine. We've been in Ukraine now for the last year, building ongoing entrepreneurship training that is very specific to the Ukrainian ecosystem. And you have the, really impressive technology and scientists, but some of the same core competencies on understanding your market, knowing your customers, being able to pivot, and some of the business concepts are all applicable. So as much as there are unique characteristics, a lot of more commonalities than there are differences in those markets.
That's interesting that there is sort of a startup DNA within the founder, but I think exactly to your point, a lot more research is coming out about the customization for ecosystems and ecosystems kind of leaning into their own strengths. But also being some foundational building blocks. Got to know your customer, right? Wherever you are, right. You have to know them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just finish up with one little last question for you. You had, and this is kind of a little bit more technical. I was just curious, you had mentioned there was eligibility for some of the countries that you're working with. Can you talk a little bit more about what makes a country eligible and how you choose the countries that you work with?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about working with the United States State Department is that, right, they define like economies, not countries, based off of U.S. Diplomatic interests. So we don't, in some cases, in some programs we run, like here in the U.S. and other programs, we control everything from the selection of the participants to the grants that we make to the investments that we're able to make to U.S. companies. With this partnership, it is really based off of a bilateral strategy between the United States government and a local government to determine the best fit. And VentureWell in our programming is a complementary piece to a broader engagement between U.S. diplomatic efforts. So over the last years, we've been in everywhere from Bhutan to Ukraine to Liberia to Peru and Chile, really based off of country acceptance of this type of model and interest of U.S. country partnerships. So, we don't get to pick the country, the U.S. government picks the country, but we try to define like what type of programming makes the most sense and how can we best support not just the entrepreneur and the startup, but really build sustainable programs through partners. So after every country we're in, we work with local startup and incubators and accelerators within those countries and offer financial support and ongoing programming through those iHubs through this program so that we're able to still build ongoing capacity through local partners. And ideally, it's those partners that are doing the ongoing work and helping to create a vibrant startup ecosystem well beyond our engagement within a country.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So if you have questions for Mark, we will get back to Mark during the panels, the more group discussions and later. So drop those in there. Mark, thank you so much.
So Oksana, you're up. So you told us a little bit about your company and the success that you had in the Ukraine. So tell us a little bit more about, so you came through the GIST program last year to Arizona, and we all got to meet you, and it was awesome through UACI. And you actually pitched at Startup Coffee, which was really great. So tell us a little bit more when you were exploring that program. What made you decide to do that program? Why were you interested in exploring the U.S. market? Can you tell us a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'd like to thank once again to Eric and Anita because it was such a great experience and you gave us so much opportunities, and I think that maybe I have not taken all of them, but I'm really grateful. And we still talk with Anita, and I'm really happy about it. And all the Tucson community is so warm and it's so inspiring. I really wish sometimes I was studying there, so maybe I could have broader network and more friends. So yeah, I think if I would be an American, I could launch a startup in Tucson. When I was considering the program, for me, very important, it was to meet the customers and to understand the sales. It was like the first priority before anything else. And actually, I've met customers and I've met a few enterprise customers and a few small, medium businesses. And It came to me finally that it would be extremely difficult for us to enter USA market. There were two situations probably I can name. The first one happened in USA when I was chatting with Jessa, who is a communications director for the whole tech center. And she told me that, okay, I've just got a phone call from our competitor in the United States. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's like, it's still working like this. It's cold phone calls that are done through all the entire customer base you have, even in like, no offense, small towns. And it's not like an enterprise level client. And still you get someone who is ready to meet with you tomorrow and he calls you. And it was very impressive for me because I understand that we don't have a huge marketing budget to cover all the internet and Google searches with money to make us number one in searches. And another thought was, okay, we can just call to all of the customers, and that's how we'll get the first trials and first clients. And then I understood that it would be really, really difficult to do. And the second one was when Anita was so kind as to find the HubSpot sales director, and he could talk with me for 15 minutes. And probably it was the most amazing 15 minutes those year. He is such a brilliant man. And I have no idea how anyone can compete with him and with HubSpot. And this is how I understood the difference in experience and skills needed to gain a significant share of market. And for sure, we don't have it. And it's okay to know it. Like, we can build it up, we can find someone with time, but we need money for this. And we've never fundraised. We've been profitable from the first day. We are bootstrapping still. We have, like, I think, tremendous results for this year, especially, but still it's not enough. And that's why we've decided finally that, okay, we should postpone a little bit and slow down, and firstly to build up the product. So the business model, how we grew up in Ukraine, was top down. So firstly, we went to big companies and enterprises. We're starting to get small, medium businesses among our customers. It's quite obvious that in such markets as the United States, we should go opposite way, down to top, and from middle small businesses and then to enterprises. And it requires a different set of products in our platform. We are doing this. I think we'll come back to this in a few years, but not now for sure.
That's great. Thank you, Oksana. I would say, so we were talking before we started with everyone in the room, and you were saying, well, don't say that we decided to go into the US market because it's not necessarily a success. But Mark and I and Eric were all saying that actually it sounds like the program was very successful for you, because as a founder, knowing that it's not the right time and that you really weren't ready, and understanding that you needed to take a different approach, both kind of culturally and in your sales cycle, and really focus on building up some of your products in the markets that you're already in, will make you more successful when you do decide to come over here. So I think it sounds like you had a overall successful experience with the program. Can you tell us a little bit more? So you talked about Tucson. Thank you for saying that you would pick Tucson as a founder. That makes us feel very excited. We always love when we get some founders, and Eric will talk a little bit more about UACI's role in that. But can you tell us a little bit more about what was it like being in the GIST program? I think some of the people on the call got to meet you when you were here, but for those that aren't familiar from a founder experience, you guys came over, you had how many people with you? How long were you in Tucson? Can you kind of like describe the experience as a founder?
I don't remember the total amount of people participating in this program. I think it's around 100 people from all over the world. But there were 4 of us in Tucson last year. It was me, 2 guys from Belarus, and 1 guy from Kosovo. We do still chat a little bit, and mostly with Belarus guys, because we have the common language, and because all of these shocking events in Belarus this year as well. But we spent 4 weeks in Tucson. I would say the truth, it was not an obvious choice for us. Why Tucson and not some other incubator place because three of us are SaaS and we are like B2B SaaS. And there are not so many customers in Tucson for us. Tucson is a great place for hardware, for example, medical, I don't know, alternative power sources, something like this. And I was really amazed with the University of Arizona, and like I have no words for it. It's fantastic. But still, we try to make our best out of it. And thanks once again to Eric and Anita that made it possible to gain the value out of this 4 weeks. And for you, Lise and Dre as well. I remember our party after the event. Really, the community is very vibrant and it's very helpful. As I said, it was very important to meet real people who might be customers and to talk to them, to conduct as many customer development interviews as possible. And yeah, I've done it as much as I could. And then we spent 2 weeks more in Washington with a little bit more meetings. It was sometimes not very clear how to settle those meetings and how to find those people. But in general, yeah, I've conducted probably around, I don't know, 30 or 40 different meetings with potential customers. And I've learned a lot. How do people actually buy? How do they make decisions? How they consider competition, pricing as well. I would say there is nothing new. It was a surprise for me to learn that it's more or less the same as in Ukraine when you're talking to people from big companies. But the magic inside is different, and that's what stops us at the moment.
Great, thank you.
I want to thank once again to the GIST as well and Venture Well, because I'm not sure I could ever do this and afford this to spend 1.5 months not at home, but somewhere, and to make it really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. If you guys have questions for Oksana, pop them in the chat and we'll come back to those when we get to our group discussion. Dre, go ahead.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. So glad we were able to get you back, Sergey. So I'll just repeat the question. I just wanted to let our audience know, what are you working on right now? What's your major project? You've been an entrepreneur for years, and so we are curious, what's new on your horizon?
This is Enduro Power, the company which is dealing with lithium batteries, but not dummy lithium batteries, but intelligent batteries, which could be monitored, could be checked, could be reconfigured, etc., remotely. So using different protocols, be it Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or any future ones. So our major approach, the company was built in 2014, as a think tank to start with. So the idea was to put some kind of intelligence on lithium as a source of energy, which was sexy at that time for some time. And I built a team of great engineers here in Tucson. Some of them I knew before, some of them were new. And we started as a think tank playing with that. So we did try to start with, different cells, different derivatives of lithium to build the battery, the prototype. So then we started to put some kind of intelligence on that. So we succeeded in that area. We have a lot of patents for this technology. We still are advanced on the market. We are not in electrical vehicles business at this moment. We can build any kind of power source. Currently, we work for the unmanned platforms, different types of batteries. We are in automotive. We are building big 31T battery, 80 amp hours, which will replace the existing lead acid batteries on truck vehicles. Again, we are not in EV because EV is a little bit far still. And we are we're building actually the battery for Worldview. This is local satellite company, you know that. So, and some sensitive technology we do provide to different telecom and different government agencies. So the company is 6 years old. As I mentioned, it was acquired by ComSovereign Holding Company, traded public company. And we are going to bring this technology we have to cell towers. You know that every cell tower in telecom has a backup, kind of a backup. So that's why we are being in partnership with our parent company, which is in 5G. ComSovereign is in 5G, very advanced technology. 95 different patents in small cells, in backhaul, etc., etc. I will not duplex technology. So just go to comsovereign.com and you will see how advanced we are. And this company, ComSovereign, was born actually in Tucson as well. So now it's in Texas. It's global. We are global. That would be it. So I cannot talk about, I don't want to talk about much about technology, but the interest is everywhere. We have interest to our technology from Holland, from Netherlands, which is one of the most advanced, from Israel as well. So those two countries are very advanced in lithium power solutions, etc. We are not competing with Chinese at all, because we are at a higher, I would say, at a higher technological level. So we did see interest from Chinese people several years ago, but we shut down our doors because they wanted to take all the tests, etc., on their soil.
It's obviously a really hot topic right now, and it sounds like you are really on the edge of that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, given your experience, what is the differences between doing business in the US and other countries?
Let me totally agree with Mark that just take even small country, so there are a lot of differences. I would just mention one thing, that the US is the best favorable market for any inventor, and I'm in high tech mostly. So for any inventor, for any entrepreneur to implement, to commercialize the idea or the company. So that's why we have this wonderful, attractive exchange, two stock exchanges, that we have wonderful regulation, we have venture capital, and plus we have a lot of international capital, which is kind of melted down here. And so following the rules, and the rules are very simple: market economy. That's it. Everything is open. That's why this is the biggest difference. If we're talking about the former Soviet bloc, former Eastern countries, so there are still huge number of bureaucracy, still I would say still big conglomerates are dominating. Small businesses are just on the kind of the shoe repair and haircut business, nothing, and maybe food industry. So you don't have these opportunities. So a lot of bureaucratic obstacles, a lot of corruption, and just name it corruption. From the fire extinguisher checkup, regular checkup, you have to pay bribe. You actually bribe, I call it this way, and ending with the tax office checkups, regular, etc. So during this, being in here and having experience over there with tax offices, I would say that over here, this is absolutely transparent and wonderful. I did pass the 3-year checkup with the IRS, because we were startup company for 4.5 years. You see, we didn't pay taxes. We had just investors' money. So there was interest, of course. And the way we did go through that process, and it took about 1 year. And the process we did experience over there, for instance, even in Germany, which is one of the most advanced developed economies. So this is day and night. Here it was smooth, very friendly, very absolutely engaging. So both sides heard. So you can bring consultants. You see, you can defend yourself openly. Over there, no, it's just bureaucratic, so that you are suppressed. You feel like a little rabbit in front of the huge python. So that's the biggest difference. I agree with Mark. So take any country, it has its specifics, it has its traditions, etc.
Yeah.
Over here, for everybody is the same rule. No matter where you're from, no matter what origin of your funding is, so you are within the same brackets.
One thing that piqued my interest too was when you were talking about the teams that you've been building. Is there any way that you could, what's advice that you would offer about building international teams, working cross-culturally as you find talent? Anything you want to add to that?
With my experience, with my 30 plus years experience in business, in different countries, with different nationalities, ethnics, religion approaches, male, female attitudes, in different businesses, construction, telecom, travel, multimedia, just name it. So cabling, I've been invested in so many of them. So building the team from my perspective is, at least for the startup company, is to build the family. So that's how it doesn't have to be formal. So sometimes I reject any kind of offer when I see that it is the teams which are coming to me, for instance, for seed money, are very formal within their relations, very business relations, no friendly relations. You see, they count hours they invested into the product or whatever, or program development. So I like the friendly relations. So my current team consists of the people from Iran, from Armenia, from Russia, from Ukraine, from the States, of course. We have a lot of regional born Americans, all Americans, but different backgrounds, different ancestries. So we're very, very friendly, I would say. We visited each other. Even I'm the boss visiting their families. They are at my place, you see. So that's how you, at least to start up before you come to corporate regulations, guidelines, best practices, etc. We are experiencing now. Yeah, the transition is now from the small company, just how many we had? We had 20 people. Now we are growing into the bigger corporate managed, with corporate law, with a lot of paperwork, not just dress codes, but extremely detailed approaches are coming. But to start with, you have to meld these cultures as well, you see. So when you have these different people from different countries, first of all, of different backgrounds, diversity is very good. So that's my very emotional message. So you have to really be knowing, not just respecting background, but knowing and participating in somebody's life beyond the walls of the company.
We are going to move on to our next panelist, and thank you so much.
Eric, you're up. So you told us a little bit about UACI. Is there anything else you'd like to add there? And then if not, do you want to walk us through some of your international soft landing programs?
So I guess the thing to add about UACI is kind of how we serve. So we serve in three ways. We have programming. So for all the startups that are in incubator, we take them through a roadmap, a continuum of education activities. We expose them to given topics, then we help them implement those topics in their businesses. We have people to execute that. So we have a mentor in residence. We have 4 subject matter experts. We have a staff, and we have an extended network. So between those people, as well as the workshops that we put on for our startups, they help to execute the exposure and accountability that it takes to take a given topic and implement it into their business. And then we have space. So we have 18,000 square feet of the tech park. We have wet labs, dry labs, collaboration center, prototyping lab, offices, things of that nature. We are in the process this week of completing our second physical incubator. It's a biotech focused incubator in Oro Valley. And then we have what's coming at the tech park of the Bridges. We've got 36 startups right now. They're representative not just of Tucson, but throughout the state. We have some on the East Coast. We just onboarded a startup from Mexico. We have one coming in from Canada at the beginning of next year. So I think kind of the way that we do things, especially this year, has transitioned to a virtual environment, with the exception of those that need very specific physical spaces, such as wet labs, which we have a series of procedures that they now go through to ensure that that's all safe. From an international perspective, we really serve 2 ways. One is fairly straightforward and standard. We do have this program that we offer, and it adds a platform. And so what every startup should be working on, so that they can ensure that they're solving a true problem, that they have a clear customer segments identified, that they've spoken with those customer segments, they understand the value proposition, how they're going to make money, all the standard things, right? And help to implement that. But then, for example, with what we're doing in the biotech space in Oro Valley, we can layer on domain experts and a network of folks that can help them understand the regulatory pathways. When it comes to international founders, that first way is very much similar. So they come over and there's a platform of things that they need to be working on to understand what is occurring for them here in the United States. Who are their potential customers? What is the value they're bringing? How are they going to obtain revenue or funding? But then we bring in other aspects of that to make sure that they're supported in terms of how to navigate the culture that might be different, and communication, and government regulatory structures, things of that nature. So an example of this, we just brought in a software company that is moving here from Mexico. They just came on board with us 2 months ago, and they're patching right into our program. They're engaging in the workshops with our other entrepreneurs. They're talking with our subject matter experts and our mentor. Same thing occurring with an autonomous vehicle company coming here from Canada. Of course, we have some strengths in that area here in Tucson, so that helps, but they're just patching into our normal programming. And then we're adding an extra layer of focus on to ensure that they get caught up on some of the things that maybe they hadn't experienced in their countries or that were different. So that's the first way. Second way that we serve international founders is very much like what we did with the GIST program. So our international soft landing program is called Global Advantage. We work with cohorts of startups that come here for a given time period, and they get more of like an accelerator program. So it's cohort based, it's a defined time period, it's a heavy focus on education. And I would say one of the biggest lessons learned that we had in doing the GIST program was that where normally we're heavy focus on education and implementation, oftentimes when international founders are ready to move to the US market or ready to consider that, they're a little beyond that. They want to meet with customers. They want to do US-based customer discovery. They want to make sure that they feel supported by the municipalities and local government. And so because of that, there's a large shift in focus in our international programming to do that. But the basis of it is international founders are coming here, they're experiencing our region, very intense on US-based customer discovery, connections within the community to ensure that they're rooted. And then some of the other great things that we do in a community like ours in terms of economic development, communication, right? What it's like to experience the cost of living here, connection to other markets, things of that nature. So we're just helping them connect in with all of that and make a determination as to whether this is a place for them based on what they're learning.
Great, thanks, Eric. So tell us a little bit more about how the stage or maturity of a startup affects how or when they enter the US and how UACI kind of helps them navigate that process.
Sure. So I would say even further back than the current version of our international programming, one thing that we used to do as a tech park and an incubator is travel around the world. So we would actually go to startups in other countries, and that was our first approach. And we had no trouble finding startup companies in other countries. There are other countries that have really thriving startup ecosystems. And we would go there and we would talk to them and they would say, yes, we want to come to the US market. We are ready to go. And we said, great, come on down. We'll provide you with education. We'll show you everything you need to know. And they're like, excellent. How am I going to pay for that? Right. And so that's one huge key critical factor. We spent years going around the world talking with 30 to 40 startups in a 3 or 4 day period. And all of them wanted to do this, but they just weren't necessarily there yet because, finding the resources to make that happen is hard. They're already not taking a salary, right? Now they're giving up everything to come here for a given time period to do all this exploration work. That costs a lot of money, right? You got to find a place to stay. You got to, above and beyond then taking advantage of programming like ours. So that's the first one. And so we have there are great mechanisms out there. GIST accomplishes that goal for them. And it allows even, mid-stage startups that have traction, just like Oksana, who was right at the perfect point to determine if this was right. And then we have that mechanism through our Global Advantage program, where we actually have funding to do similar work, to actually fund these startups to come here, give them the resources they need to really make that exploration happen. And then, yes, the other huge difference between the stages of startups is the balance between education and just getting down and hitting the pavement with them and making inroads and connections. So for us, when the later the stage of the startup, the more the value of the Block A and the university comes into play, where we can use the connections we have, where we can build, further connections, maybe in a way that they wouldn't have the ability to do, to make sure that they're doing their customer discovery work here in the United States. And so I think those two major things we found were differences.
Yeah, great. So let's just keep going there. And you talked about this a little bit, but so using the Block A and then some of the other UACI's great resources, what sort of specific support are you finding that international founders request once they're here? I mean, Oksana talked about it a little bit, Sergey hit on it a little bit, different things that they needed, but are there some general things? And then are there more specific things that really help, that really make sense for programs like GIST and UACI as an option for international founders?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Oksana said it, right? She said, when I decided to come to the United States, I was here to go talk to customers, right? I was there to go build a group of potential customers that we could sell to, so that we can establish a footprint in the US market and grow from there. And we find that that's fairly common in entrepreneurs from some countries. Sometimes with entrepreneurs from Mexico, for example, the first thing that we hear often is, I need an address. Can you just provide me with an address? Because I want people to be able to make a 520 area code phone call and send their mail to somewhere in Tucson. And, we can send somebody up to Tucson to pick up that mail, right? And to listen to those voicemails. And then we say, okay, great. Well, how are you going to get customers here? You're going to have a great place for them to call, and you're going to have a place for them to send checks. But before you get checks, you got to build a customer base. And before you build a customer base, you got to make sure that you're identifying the right people and creating the right value. And so oftentimes with startups like those that are just thinking place-based, once I step foot, in the incubator at the tech park in Tucson, Arizona, they'll just start sending me money. It doesn't always occur. And so they eventually, then realize that the value of the programming is probably more so than the value of our unique space. I think part of it is helping startups to understand how to do that work. Even with Oksana, I remember she's a very mature entrepreneur. She had a lot of success coming from Kiev. I mean, absolutely inspirational to work with. But we even were working on things like, phrasing and intentions of emails when you're following up from folks that you network with. And how do you phrase that? And what does that look like? And how are you going to ensure that you get a response so that you can get that meeting? And so I think really it's being able to take in what their intentions are and help kind of weave in what we would normally work on with our startups with deep customization there.
Yeah, I was going to say not a lot of parallels between working with local entrepreneurs and international founders, teaching a lot of the same lessons, it sounds like. So is there anything else that was maybe the most surprising thing about working with international founders, Eric, as you guys have kind of done that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things is that we in the incubator world get so caught up in serving startups, helping them with their business, right? We have a 27-point giant roadmap that focuses all on their business, and that's all they want to do is work on their business. But and we're happy to do that. That's what we're here for. We're passionate about that. But one of the things that was truly fun to watch when we worked with specifically cohorts, so like the GIST cohort of international founders, is how much the community played a role. If you're gonna put a base down in the United States, and you're going to move yourself there as a CEO, or you're going to bring people there, or you're going to hire people there, you want to make sure the community is good that you live in. So the interaction with our other entrepreneurs was a lot of fun to watch. They're traveling on the weekends to places that we suggest, engaging with networks like Startup Tucson. When the community really came together and provided a lifestyle approach in addition to the business approach, that was actually really surprising, because we initially thought, and we had programmed, every time we do this, we program like, here's a list of things you can go do. Not fully recognizing over time how much that actually meant something. And so not that everybody looks at it as a vacation, but you want to experience the community as well. So the community support when we do these things, when we work with companies from either cohort-based programming like GIST or like some of the startups we have right now that are just moving here, it's huge.
Great. And we have our first audience question from Diana for Eric. So Eric, what is your favorite or a unique new startup that is currently working with UACI?
Well, that is kind of like asking which one of my children I like the most.
I knew you were going to say that.
I would never tell you. We have,
even though you have a favorite. Yeah.
Both of Eric's kids are adorable, by the way, so it would be hard to pick a favorite.
There you go. It is so hard to pick a favorite. I mean, it is. Well, the best thing is when we get pinged by the media to, hey, can you come on and do something or do this interview, and can you bring one of your startups? Like, it's the hardest thing to pick a startup because they're all doing such incredible work. I'm gonna put out two, and go look them up. But just because it's been recent work for us, but Sylvan Source is a startup that is out of Green Valley that we're working with, who is one of 3 Southern Arizona finalists in the Arizona Innovation Challenge. So if you happen to be on this call and you're located in Southern Arizona, look up Sylvan Source. They're one of ours. Fingers crossed, though, all the companies in this statewide competition are great. The other one is Theracia, who just won we have a sponsored launch program. So they're going to be sponsored in our incubator by a bioindustry association of Southern Arizona in our new Oro Valley incubator. And they're working on a therapy for dyskinesia, which is the involuntary shaking that occurs with Parkinson's. So really exciting. But all of our startups are incredible. My favorite entrepreneur in the world to ever work with, of course, is Oksana. But we definitely have such a great group.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And then we did have a question from Christina. Hi, Christina. Thank you for being here today. That Mark kind of answered in the chat, but I think it'd be great if maybe you wanted to answer for the group so everybody can hear your kind of response. So she had asked, how was Oksana paired with Tucson? So Mark, can you talk a little bit more about just like total countries that you work in, how that program worked? She said the total cohort was about 100, right? And then they were split between different cities. So can you talk about how that worked and where they went and that whole process?
Sure.
I also would be happy to hear the answer finally.
Perfect.
I know, it's a mystery, elaborate algorithm. No. Yeah, so full disclosure, the U.S. business incubation was entirely a pilot. So we essentially did 3 separate processes, which I don't know if we would do this again, to be honest. We had entirely separate review of participants and companies selected based off of a number of different criteria, but a lot of it related to their advanced, how much could they get out of a U.S. Incubation program, and how sophisticated is their market? How much do they understand what they're really getting in for? And how mature is that person, reliable is that individual to actually be in the US for this period of time? So there's an independent selection criteria for the participant and an independent selection criteria for incubators and accelerators in the US. Also based off of like how the existing programs they already had, support structures in place, networks and resources that they could offer, that then VentureWell paid for, both the participant and gave funding for the institution to support. So what we have learned, and then it was a matchmaking, to be honest. It was like, okay, well they have the service, there's a provision here, and we also wanted to have some cohorts so that a startup wasn't by themselves in a city that they didn't know. So a cohort component was a big part of it, and making sure that matching process was aligned with other folks within their cohort. So what we learned is that institutions like UACI are essentially the ideal host, quite literally like the perfect example of how this could be done well. Primarily, and I just say that because Eric's here, but what he described as the community effect of this integration within the university, integration within a city, and the full components of the network, the resources, the connections, and the soft, kind of the lifestyle, soft skills that they were able to provide really created an experience that I think we heard from the entrepreneurs was invaluable. And that wasn't true across all incubators. So what UACI was able to do is what we would want to replicate. We probably wouldn't spread out across 10 states. There were 29 startups in that cohort for that pilot across 10 states. So it made it a pretty dispersed group, and we had a huge variability in terms of the experience. Overall success, but I think we've learned a lot. So what we would want to do is probably a much more detailed needs assessment of the startups ahead of time, and allow for a little bit more of a shared selection, prioritization of where they want to go. Because to be honest, we asked that a little bit, but everyone's like, oh, I would love to go to Northern California or New York City or Boston. Like, well, too bad, those aren't on the table. There's way other better places to go. So so I think a lot of what we are going to do moving forward, which we'll be doing this year, is allow for more of a conversation ahead of time, more shared prioritization and selection process ahead of time, and then allow for a conversation to happen, because oftentimes the orientation happened when that startup arrived in the US. And so there was a lot of orientation that happened while they were here, and we could probably do a lot more to do that in the future. So yeah, it was an experiment, a lot of lessons learned, but overall, everyone felt extremely, I think, satisfied, wants to continue this model. And I think we know the partners that we know can really do this even at a larger scale than we did last year.
That's great.
COVID-19 pending. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's important that startups here, that all of us also experiment and try different things and learn and iterate. And so thank you for sharing the lessons that you guys learned and kind of how you're thinking about improving and changing that program moving forward. Oksana, did that shed any light on your experience?
I'll try to be polite and say, yes, sure. like I said,
man, harsh crowd this morning.
In the end, it's like it's already 7 p.m. You know, I can have my glass of wine and it's warm. But yeah, but in the end, it was good, and I'm really happy to meet Eric and Anita and the guys we've been together with. Yeah, there is some room for improvement for sure. But as I've said, we do all iterate, we do all find the best ways how to do it next time better. So okay.
Yeah, great.
It's good.
I have a question for the general panel. If you could give one piece of advice for a founder looking at a new international market, what's the best advice that you would give them to be successful in a new market?
I can cut in and throw a pitch in there as always for Southern Arizona, but I would encourage founders to look at markets beyond what they would think. For example, the standard pitch that we give in Southern Arizona, is access to larger markets, quick flight to LA. If you're in the manufacturing business, you can jump down to Mexico. Low cost of living, the most incredible innovation ecosystem that you could potentially, ever engage with. And some of these things, really resonate with some startups in some industries, and sometimes it's not a fit but when coming here, there are emerging communities across America that are becoming hotspots for startup activity. Even if you, again, a pitch for Southern Arizona, but if you look at some of the statistics that are coming out in the news, we constantly rank as one of the cities that's going to recover the quickest from COVID-19 for a number of different reasons. And so, as situations change, as startups grow, the same way that Oksana spoke about starting with, maybe smaller customers and moving up as being kind of a top-down approach from what she's doing as a big fish in a smaller pond in Ukraine. Similar thing can be applied when they're considering the United States. Where do you land? Where do you establish a base? Where do you take advantage of the most resources and gain access to the larger markets like New York, like Boston, like Northern California, things like that?
I would probably continue saying that if you do have in mind international and global market, build it from the day zero, because it's like everybody says about it, but it's actually quite difficult to understand how much problems you will face after like 5 years operating only in 1 or 2 countries. There are so many narrow places where you just can't find the right match. It's about time zones, it's about your customer success and support, it's about sales, it's about different currencies, and you just there is a day when you just can't handle any more customers because it will just crush everything. And it's our mistake as well. We haven't built the product from the first day as an international and global product, and this is the lessons that we learn at the moment, how to finally scale it up to match the international market. So maybe that's, if it were one advice, it would be this.
That's great advice. That's awesome. Mark, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say just two things at a macro level, similar to what Eric said. You can do a top-down analysis and say there are so many customers in this country, and there are so many patients in this country. But it really, doing it from a bottom up and really doing due diligence, checking references, getting a beachhead market in those countries. It's one thing just to say that there's, X billion dollars in that country, but as we all seen these pitch decks doing those TAMs and JAMs, like that's all. No one cares about that. No one gives a TAM, to quote an investor friend. Like you really have to actually find some nuance. Do your own customer discovery. You can do that without being in the country. You can do that virtually. Really get a detailed understanding to determine, no matter what country you're in, India or America, like really find specifics on your go-to-market, not just because it's a big country that has a bunch of money. And then on the more tactical thing, get a good lawyer. Really have good legal support in country, because the process, the cost, the structure, people understand what that is. It's not as simple as just on your own filling out a bunch of documents, but having good legal support who understands the regulatory environment, understands the corporate formation. All of those resources are invaluable, and to look for good legal support in those countries is critical.
My approach is to start with the geography. Why geography? Because there are different founders, different companies, different industries. In the States, we have some kind of clusters. For instance, health is in one place, high tech is another, IT could offer different opportunities, optics is something else, you see. So first of all, look at the geography and the venture capitalists around. So Southern Arizona, unique thing, yeah. So the University of Arizona, one of the biggest universities, one of the most supportive university for the incubators, for the startups, for the international as well. So this is one of the most international universities. So this is a good place to look for those who are in optics, in medical now with new University of Arizona president, medical field, and of course high tech, oriented mostly to the airspace or defense. So that would be my approach. Look at the geography where your specific industry clusters do develop. And of course, the venture capitalists. Unfortunately, Southern Arizona is good on one thing, but not good on another. So venture capitalism is not that developed as, for instance, as in California.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Sergey, and all of our panelists. Thank you for those insights. Any more questions from our audience? Or we're going to wrap up with our final innovation economics question that we ask every session. Okay, if you do, pop it in there, and if we have time, we'll come to it. So let's go Mark first, and then Eric, and then Oksana, and then Sergey. What is your favorite startup success story? Does not have to be your startup. And what do you attribute their success to? So Mark, you're first.
Oh man, 9,500 startups to choose from. Yeah, that's a good. All right. With naming. Do you want to know the names to start so you can then kind of go and see? I would say it's a very recent one. It's a medical device company here in the U.S. That's particularly focused on spinal surgery and realignment of spinal surgery. So this is one team we've got to see through every single point of the process, from when they were students to graduating to forming a venture to raising their first round that we helped co-invest in their first equity round. And I think what has been amazing about that trajectory has been how many failures that they had throughout the entire process. It was they had a serious issue with IP and tech transfer out of the university. They had a ridiculous co-founder story that they had to fire immediately. They had serious issues on sort of some regulatory clearance that was really hard to go through. They had every possible hurdle that they had to go through. An ISO manufacturer that backed out at the last minute, and so many different things that were really, really tricky to get their device off the ground, to get their fundraising off the ground. And what was amazing was how much that didn't stop them. Like the resilience required and how hard it is to do this. When everything goes right is remarkable. When everything goes wrong, it's even more remarkable to still see the startups be able to pivot, to be flexible, to move forward, and to continually have moderate success. And they're still moving along with the team, a company, and sort of now a Series B round that is showing really, really significant promise. And if I were them and I was their founder, I don't know if I would be able to do that. I really generally don't know if I would have had to be able to take that much failure, that much difficulty, and still come out of it to be successful. Is a testament to all the entrepreneurs and founders out there.
Yeah, it sounds like they had a lot of grit, our favorite founder term. And it sounds like they would be a good candidate for a How I Built This podcast episode if you want to submit them over there, Mark.
Yeah.
Learn a lot.
Good call. Yeah, we'll do it.
Eric, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm going to cheat and throw two quick ones out there. One of my favorites is a graduate of our incubator, of course, student at the university who worked with his professors to develop an error correction software for hardware devices. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. It's pretty technical, but it actually means quite a bit to the industry. Graduated from the university with a PhD, but then decided to run with this company. Had some of the faculty members involved as team members and advisors, grew that company. The way that we all hope, right? Fundraised a few rounds, got some federal grants in, grew the team, international team, and then came back and now works with our startups and provides them with workshops and education and connections and advisement. So, the pretty standard story. But if I were to give you my favorite startup ever that I enjoyed working with was it was a company that was making a seemingly silly geo-tracking software app for nightlife. And they thought that they had it all, and they went off to go build a bunch of software. And in working with them, determined that customer discovery was really where they needed to be. They needed to go figure out if this is wanted. And in doing that, they figured out that nobody that they thought was going to be their customer wanted this, and failed. And that is like probably the biggest success story that you're going to hear, because, if you don't do that work, if you don't put in the effort, you get what we call zombie startups that are, moving forward somehow, and no customer is going to buy this thing. And for them, that team learned a lot. They went off and did other startups. They got more successful that way, and they wouldn't have done that if they went through that process.
Yeah, I think that's great. We're learning that a lot, right? With Oksana deciding not to go into the U.S. market, even those things that you learn are super valuable and it can be considered a success. We do the same when we work with our founders in fundamentals, and Kanisha and Dre and Sophia and I are talking about all the time. It's okay if at the end of this process you decide you're not actually going to launch your company, because that means you just saved yourself a lot of time, anguish, sleepless nights, all of those things. And now you have the tools you need to successfully launch your next great idea. And you haven't burnt yourself out on one that maybe was never really meant to be from the beginning. So thanks, Eric. I think that's a good example. Oksana, your favorite startup success story?
I have two of them. They're both from Ukraine for sure. The first one, I think you might know it. It's a Reface app. It's like they have tremendous success now. It's number one uploads in App Store. And we've been to their office in Kiev. It's just like, I don't know, half mile from our office. It's not the first project from these guys. And they are really genius. And they've changed the business model for 6 months from one to another, and that's how they became so popular. It was first a B2B, and they changed it to B2C, and I'm still have no idea what are they going to do next, because for sure this is not the final stop. It's just like some point to get the data probably to develop this neural network more. But as they are not friends of mine, but I know these people, I'm really proud of them that they made this success to understand, to make people understand that there are a lot of really genius IT people here in Ukraine, and sometimes you just need somebody to to make the project out of it. And the second one is also Ukrainian project. It's Leaky 24. It's a startup that it's a drugs delivery, drugs meaning like from drugstore store, like normal drugs. And they have found a small outside. There's a very strict legislation about the drugs delivery because you can't deliver them. You should go to the pharmacy and buy it by person. And they have found some I'm losing the words. There are some leaks in this legislation they might use to make this delivery happen. And they raised money and they made an app, a mobile app and web app, and they became very popular here. And now they are scaling up to Poland and some other East European countries. But what I'd like to say is that I would be really happy to name a few female-led tech startups, and we still don't see a lot of them. And I hope that our community is working at the moment on this issue in Ukraine, and I hope that we'll see much more in the next 5-10 years. We do have them, but it's not usually tech startups. It's something about physical products like fashion products, something like this. And my personal also idea is to bring more females to tech startups and tech world, and to help them understand how to lead these companies and to grow yourself into this community.
Thank you, Oksana. That's one of our missions too. So we're very excited that you're also working on it in Ukraine. So Sergey, you want to share your success story, startup success story?
Yeah, sure. So I have a lot of them along this long time I have on this earth. You see, so besides my stories, I would be very quick and short since we are on Zoom. So this is one of the best I like success stories of the foreign person from China. This is Eric Young, who started in 2012, struggling, building the platform for the data relations, long distance relations, etc. And now you see what we have, what platform success, multi-million, almost 1 million different teams using this great platform. This is the success story, really have to be in front of everybody. Besides a lot of small ones in millions, counted in hundred thousands, in millions, in multi-millions. So money doesn't matter in this case. In this case, matter how you feel. So definitely this guy, Eric Young, feels very, very, very grateful to the States, to his consistency, to his brains, etc. So this is success story on both sides, on personal side, because he was rejected visa to the United States for so many times. You see, and he was persistent in his development. He was not afraid to drop his good paid job and just dedicate to the startup company and see where he is now. I can bring many like this from all over the world, but Zoom is good since we are in Zoom.
I like that as our closeout one. It all just reminds us that Zoom was at one point, a founder that was trying to figure it out. And then it's allowing us to all stay connected during these crazy times. So I think that was a perfect one to end on, Sergey. So thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to all of our attendees for spending some of your morning, your afternoon, and Oksana, your evening with us. Now you can get to your wine. We are super proud to have been a part of Global Entrepreneurship Week. We at Startup Tucson are here to help you if you are within the Startup Tucson or in the Tucson startup community, as is UACI and Eric and Anita. So please reach out to us or visit our website for what we have upcoming. And with that, I will close it out. Thank you again, panelists. We really appreciate it.